that if you're if you're if you're a returner, you've probably already experienced this. And if you're a new facilitator, you will experience this. There are times when you are in session or before session where you might be under a lot of pressure, under a lot of stress, either because you're overwhelmed with your own class material and the classes you are taking, or because something happens in session that you had not planned for, you were not prepared for, and you don't really know what to do. You have to adapt very quickly. And so this PowerPoint, Erica and I are going to try to help you navigate or find ways to navigate those stressful situations. Okay, so first of all, it's important to focus on planning. Planning is so important. I cannot harp on this enough. Planning is so important. And there are three areas or three topics that you should always consider when you're planning. You should always consider online and in-person students because we do have that hybrid model. Anyone can get sick at any time. You have no idea what's going to happen to your students' lives. So even if students have told you they're going to be there in person, you actually don't know what can happen to them or their family. And they still might want to attend session, but not be able to do so in person. So always plan for online students. Also, Emily had mentioned this earlier. I think it was Emily had mentioned this earlier. You might be observed by them, by your peers. In fact, at some point in the semester, you're also going to be observing your fellow facilitators to just gain ideas from them, see what works for them. Maybe that will work for you. And sometimes your observers cannot be there in person, so they'll go in through Zoom. So it's always important to have Zoom open because you might have someone trying to observe you. Another thing is if there's only one student who's attending session, we'll go into this in a bit more detail, but it's very important to know that at certain points throughout the semester, students may not be as motivated to attend SI or may not be aware of it. And so maybe only one student attends. And what's important to take away from this is your attendance does not determine your worth as an SI. I cannot tell you that enough. It really does not. Even one person that you help is enough. And on the flip side, sometimes a lot of people will attend session and you had no idea that these many people like even existed because you never even saw them go to class, but they suddenly pop up and you're like, oh, that's nice. Okay, cool. So we'll be going into a bit more detail on like how you can plan for these.
Okay. Hey guys, my name's Erica. Just want to introduce myself a little bit. This is my second semester at SIing, so still kind of new to this whole model, but we got it. So for planning, I'm thinking we'll do this tomorrow, or you'll get a look at what a planning sheet looks like and how you're supposed to fill it out. But as Caitlin mentioned earlier, you're going to plan for online students and in-person students. And at first it's a little bit like it takes a while getting used to, but you're going to run through it. And I just want to say, like, overall, like we mentioned earlier that we're not the experts. Our students were peers among these other students. And so it's okay to show them that, you make mistakes and that, oh, I forgot, like, I'm trying to handle these people like in the room in front of me and also online as well. So it's a learning process for everybody. It's okay. But when you're actually typing out how an activity is going to run for your session, you can include, okay, how am I going to include online people and how am I going to pair them? Am I going to pair them with each other online, making sure like I share my screen and sharing the classroom screen to make sure that the online students can see the board for what the in-person students can see and everything like that. So just as the semester goes on, you'll get better with practice. It's a learning experience, but it'll all be good. But what you actually write out in your planning would be an example of what's on the screen is like in-person attendees will come up to the board and draw blank, whatever topic you're talking about in that activity. And then making sure to note to yourself, okay, I'm going to share the whiteboard screen with online students so they can also annotate the screen. That's how you would do it virtually for students online. And then in person is the actually writing on the board and stuff.
And I'd also like to add that there are certain activities that you may want to facilitate that work differently on an online setting than in an in-person setting. For example, if you were to do like charades or an act it out, which is a great kinesthetic activity. So if you're looking for kinesthetic activities, there you go. What you can do is you write down in your planning, online students will have to have their camera on if able, so that you can see what they're doing as they're doing charades on their end. And that way, the online students still can do that kinesthetic activity, but it's a bit in a different environment than in-person students who would have to do it like right in front of everyone.
Okay. So planning for, wait, can you go back a slide, Caitlin? Okay, there we go. So planning for one student. I have a lot of experience with this just because the lecture mode that I had for my course last semester was completely online. So I never had face-to-face interaction with my students. So how they knew about SI was D2L post. And so it's kind of hard to make that connection when you're only making posts through D2L. They're not seeing my face. They're not like having that in-person connection. So I had only low attendance, and that's okay. And you're going to find as you go out through your time with SI, classes are different. There's different students, different personalities. So it's okay. But having one student kind of not sets you back, but it's hard to incorporate the collaboration aspect of SI when there's only one student. You don't have the two students there to bounce ideas off of each other and help them go through. So I would always write out in my planning, like, should one student attend, this is what I would have to do for that one student. And this is how I'm going to have them work through this activity. Am I going to help them? Am I going to redirect? Like, am I kind of going to play the other like partner, or am I going to like redirect them to their notes and all this stuff? So how that would actually look when going through session. Yeah, and there's examples there of what you could verbatim write out in your planning of should one student attend.
Absolutely. So on the flip end, as we had talked about before a little bit, if many students attend, so even though at certain points throughout the semester, there might be consistently like 2 people who are attending, out of the blue, like people just pop up. I don't know where they come from sometimes, but like they're there and you had like really not prepared for that. So a little story on my end so that you know from my personal experience how planning this really helps. It was my first semester SIing, and I was actually being observed. And I can't remember if it was like a review session for an exam, or that's usually when more people attend. They reach for you for as like a lifeline because they didn't study. Some of them, not all of them. But I remember I was being observed that day, and like out of nowhere, like 8 people or 12 people were in session, and I was used to having like 3 people. And I had not prepared for more than that many people because I did not expect more people to attend. And so you go through this, like as you're facilitating, you'll get used to the people who are consistently there, but you also have to plan for if more people just randomly show up, because that does happen and you have to adapt very quickly. I was very stressed, as you might imagine. Like that was very scary. I was also really not used to speaking in front of a large group of people to begin with when I started out as an SI. And I really wish I had planned for more students because I really stumbled over myself the entire session, and I could have better prepared and I could have better served those students if I had prepared. So always include in your session or consider, should there be more than blank number of students, like what are you going to do? So you might like approach this, like if there's an odd number of students, what will you do if there's an odd number of students and you're pairing them into groups of 2? Like, will one group just have an extras person? Or are you going to be pairing with that other person? Also, if you have a limited amount of material, so let's go back to like charades, and the session that you are planning for the certain activity, it covers, a certain portion of the class. And in class, let's say that there are 8 main terms that you want to focus on and that you included in your planning. These are the terms that you're going to be using in charades. But what if 12 people attend? Well, you only have 8 terms. So what about the other people? In that situation, you can prepare more terms to use in charades from maybe previous lectures in that class, kind of to like recall information of the past, like past classes. That may help. And that's a way that you can plan for more students. Or if you're like, let's say you're doing a session about SI and one of the activities was about the three elements. And so redirection, checks for understanding, and wait time. And you're splitting these students into 3 different groups. Well, if you only plan for 3 different people and 4 show up, like how are you going to, like, where's this other person going to go? What if 6 people show up? What are you going to do then? So always plan for more than what you expect and how you will navigate that. That will help you so much, especially around test times when more people are more likely to attend.
And adding back on a little bit to that slide, you're not gonna actually sit down and write like, okay, if 1 person shows up, if 2 people show up, if 3 and 4. So kind of just keep it broad, and there'll be points in sessions where you're waiting for students to show up and stuff like that, and you're actually realizing like numbers are starting to increase, and that's okay. Just have a broad plan, and you will have to make decisions on your feet. And not that it's like a scary situation or something that you should be nervous of. You should just be aware, okay, well, I'm going to have to fix my planning just a little bit, like in the moment, instead of actually writing it all out, preparing for it. And we say write it out because your planning is like your outline, and you can always go back to it to get your idea of, oh, wait, this is what I wanted for this session. But since there's a little bit more people than I had anticipated, this is what I'm going to do. So next slide. Okay. So remembering the 3 elements. So like we said, plan for them. It's always good to prepare and be prepared. So write out how you're going to incorporate the 3 elements, write out the specific checks for understanding questions. I did this all the time because sometimes I would just rather have something than not have it. And that's for your safety net in case you forget during the sessions. For wait times, we will teach you more about the water bottle trick to make it less awkward for you and your students. And then also, as the new facilitators, and it's the beginning of the semester, we all need to relax, chill out. It's going to be okay. We get lost in wanting the session to go perfectly and making sure that you look best for the students and that you don't want to make a mistake or say something wrong or something like that. But if you just take a few deep breaths and relax, it's going to be okay. And the students will feel comfortable. So.
Oh, is that thing showing up on that? Oh, okay.
Fancy.
I don't remember adding that in, but you know what? Let's roll with the punches. Okay. So as we talked about planning for it, something I always include in every planning, in every what's it, the content box, in every content box for mains, opening, and closing. I literally have this like saved somewhere, and I just copy and paste it in to remind myself when I look at my planning during session. Should any student be confused, redirect to peers before redirecting to notes. You may also include, redirect to the internet only if necessary, redirect to bonus hour or professor office hours if students are still confused. This is a great copy and paste like sentence or 3 sentences or however many in each of your like content portions. And it, like it's 2 clicks to copy and paste. And it's a great reminder when you're in session, if you're looking through your planning, like I look through my planning, to remind myself to redirect, because sometimes I don't allow notes throughout the entire session or the entire activity for whatever reason, whatever the material may be. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but no notes will be allowed. And so I might say, redirect to peers, but do not redirect to notes. And to remind myself to do that to help them best, I always add that in. Something else you could add in, I have seen someone do this before and it really helped them. It may help you as well. In the checks for understanding box, they wrote, after asking whatever the question was, use wait time by counting to like seven hippopotamuses in your head, or hippos, or however that plural word is. And that has really helped them. And that may really help you in remembering wait time. after you ask a question. Because it's really easy to just immediately like give gratification to the student. And that's not what we're looking for, because that's not what's going to best benefit the student themselves.
So as mentioned earlier, writing out 1 to 2 specific checks for understanding questions. I've always done this in planning. Towards like the end of the semester, I got more comfortable with it as it went on. And so I would write out that I would wait to see what direction the students took the activity in, like kind of like, yeah, you plan for this certain topic, but if we're leaning to like one direction of it, I'm obviously gonna ask a question about what they're talking about, if that makes sense. It'll make more sense once you get into like actually planning activities based on your course, but just always write it out in case you're like, I can't think of anything, so I'm going to ask you this, and it'll be relating to the content of the activity that you're doing. So it'll make sense, but you're like, I can't think of anything on my own. And so I'm just going to use what I wrote in planning. Also, don't forget to include the answers, because you don't want to be, that's great if you have the question, but if they give you the answer and you're like, I don't remember what the answer was supposed to be, like always just put your answers to the checks for understanding questions, and also to your activities. That, you know, it's going to help you in the long run.
I also want to mention that, we all make mistakes, even as facilitators. Even if you've taken the class before, you might not always remember the answer immediately. So as Erica had just mentioned, please do yourself a favor and add the answer. And again, these 1 to 2 checks for understanding questions are essential, because as Erica had mentioned, again, you may not use them. You may change the questions actually in session. But if you don't have any ideas on what questions to ask, you have this safety net of questions that you can use. All right, so add a pinch of self-care. These are, so the first one is the water bottle trick, and the second one is something that I do. And it's extremely, extremely beneficial for me personally, and maybe for you. So if you want to be an honorary member of Hydration Nation, you may want to consider bringing a water bottle to your sessions with you. I think a lot of times we, especially in college, and you're really stressed, you may forget to take care of yourself and treat your body properly. And hydrating is one of the areas that I know is lacking in a lot of people's lives. I can speak on a personal level with that. Of course, you can bring tea and coffee if you'd like, but this is a great time to practice wait time as you're taking a sip of, like maybe your tea. And so after you ask a question, you take a sip of water or tea or coffee. And this allows time where you don't feel stressed to start speaking, because you're taking a sip of something. And it also gives time for the student to just process what you had asked. And then if the student answers the question, that's when you can take another sip of water or tea or coffee. And again, that way you don't feel pressure to immediately like say that they're wrong or that they're right. And this is also a time that allows the students time to process what they had answered. Because sometimes I know for me, you may ask me a question and it takes me a moment, like I have a loading screen of what you said, and then I answer the question. And then there's another loading screen. I'm like, oh, wait, no, I said the wrong thing. I mean to say this. And that's why wait time is important, to allow the students to actually think through your question and their answer in depth. And it's always nice to take care of yourself as you're giving them time to do that. Something that I personally do. Right now, even if I know you in session, doesn't matter how well I know anyone, like I get very anxious and sometimes I forget how to breathe, and that is not good for me and it's not good for them. Them being like anyone else who's around me. And so what I do is after I ask a question, I always focus on my breathing. And after they answer a question, I always immediately focus on my breathing, because I need to make sure that I'm remaining calm and I'm staying grounded, and it helps me not become too anxious in session. So if you're someone who gets anxious being in front of people, get anxious talking to people, or just for like no reason whatever, you just get really nervous and breathing becomes a bit of a struggle for you, after you ask a question, just like take a breath, like, and then do that like 6 times. That's what I do. And that usually allows me to like ground myself again and then continue with session in a calm manner. So this is a great way to utilize wait time while also making sure that you are calming yourself down.
Okay, so we talked about what to plan for, and obviously, like, you don't have to write out verbatim everything, just little, like, it could be one word that reminds you of, okay, this is how I do this, and you'll get used to it, you'll have a pattern, like, the more you practice it, the more it becomes like a habit, through sessions and stuff, but just for the beginning, like, little reminders, okay, this is what, I gotta remember to do this and that stuff, so that is what we plan for. So how to, um remain calm. So we'll have clear communication and expectations. We all work and feel better when we understand what's going on and expected of us. So take the first like session to just kind of explain to students like, hey, this is what wait time is. Because personally, I've my freshman year, I had a facilitator who didn't do that. And so I was kind of confused. I was like, I thought I was supposed to be told the answer. Like, I'm kind of waiting. I'm like, am I right? Am I wrong? Like, I don't know. So if we state that, okay, I'm using wait time, this is the whole philosophy behind SI and why we do this, then students are like, okay, that makes sense. And we can proceed on with session. And as mentioned previously today, fellow facilitators are great resources. Everybody on the SI team is just an email away or message away from us. So if you need anything, like I'm having low attendance, what are some strategies, like what other facilitator is having good attendance, what are they doing? And can I implement that to make my attendance go up? And anything you could think of. You can ask facilitators, mentors, senior leaders, all of that, and we can help you. As busy students with busy schedules, you're going to have to schedule time to plan. So I would physically write out, block times of when to plan. So if you're going along and you're like, okay, I got to sit down and plan. I plan for an hour and then I'm done, walk away. So you stay calm. And then trial and error, don't be afraid to try a new activity if your students could really benefit from it. It's kind of nerve-wracking because you're like, I don't know how this is going to turn out, but it's a learning process for everybody. You learn that maybe it didn't work. You learn maybe that it really did work and was a good activity that you can use again in the future for different concepts and stuff like that, that really catches your students' attention. So trial and error, don't be afraid to try it.
So, as Erica had mentioned beautifully, communication is key in any area of life that you're going to be in. Communication is so important. And my own story, as Erica had mentioned hers, similarly, my freshman year, when with my first class that had an SI, she never talked about what the elements were, and she used them. She used them very well. But because no one knew what it was about, I know people stopped going to her sessions because they didn't understand what she was doing. They thought that they talked behind her back. I remember about how like she didn't know anything of what was going on because she'd never directly answer. She'd always like ask another person if that was the right answer or like make you check your notes. Like she didn't know what was going on. And that's not true. She knew exactly what was happening, but she didn't communicate that with us. So the students did not know. And so what I do is at the very beginning of every semester, my first session and at the, like before session begins, or if there's like a new person who attends my session sometime throughout the semester, I always take time to ask them, hey, have you ever had an SI before? Have they ever talked to you about the 3 elements that we have to do? And okay, if they had, then let me just re-explain it. Or if not, okay, let me explain this. So I always tell them, as an SI, I'm not a tutor. I'm trained to do 3 different things that tutors do not do. And I want to explain that to you so that you understand why I'm doing this. And so you don't think that I don't know what's going on. Sometimes I might not know what's going on because it might be a topic that my professor did not talk about, but the SI professor did. But with regards to this, so I tell them, throughout the session, I will ask you questions about what we're talking about. I'll ask you in-depth questions so that you think more critically and more thoroughly about this information. And this is to help you with active recall. I'll also, if you ask me a question, I cannot immediately tell you if you are right or wrong. I cannot directly tell you the right answer. Because I can't do this, I might redirect you to one of your peers or your notes. And this makes sure, or this allows for collaboration and for you to gain different insight and different points of view, because some people may remember things differently, and hearing these different ways to remember different concepts might be very beneficial for you. And that's why I do redirection. Also, there's something called wait time, and this is something that no one likes. I don't know a single person who likes wait time. And if you're that single person, then good for you. I'm not. And so, wait time is when you ask me a question before I redirect. Um, I'll just stand there and I'll stare at you, and we'll have an awkward time together, and it'll be okay. But it'll be weird, and that's fine. And then right after you answer a question, I'm going to awkwardly stare at you again. And it'll be also awkward, but that's okay. And so they're aware of what these elements are. They're aware that, there's going to be some awkwardness. That's fine. We're in it together. No one likes wait time, or I personally have not met a person who likes wait time, but it's beneficial to build confidence. And by being open and transparent about that, what I have found from my personal sessions in the past, or semesters of facilitating in the past, is that the students start doing the work for me sometimes. Like, they'll immediately ask me a question, and then they'll stop and I'll stare at them, and they'll be like, wait, no, you can't answer that. And then they'll turn and they'll redirect themselves so I don't have to do it. So that also takes some pressure off of you, because your students are partially doing your job for you in this way, because you communicated that with them and they understand why you're doing it and why it's important. And they'll tell you about it. Like, at least my students always tell me about it. Like, wow, wait time really sucks. Like, why do you really do this? I'm like, I told you already, it's to build confidence. And they're like, it really doesn't. I'm like, no, over time it will. You'll see. And at the end of the semester, they're like, actually, it really did. I still don't like it though. So again, communication is very important, and it can help relieve stress.
Okay. So we all work better, or oh my goodness, hold on. We work better together. So as mentioned earlier in today's training, that is one of SI's mottos. So again, feel free to reach out to fellow facilitators or mentor groups. We have established those today, and throughout the semester we'll meet in those and have check-ins, have meetings, morale events, stuff like that. So that'll be really good. And then you can brainstorm with other facilitators that facilitate for the same course as you. So I know training for last semester, I got to like sit down with a person who had been a facilitator for a couple semesters, and they did the exact same course as me. And they were like, these are activities that work for these students, and this is how you can incorporate the different learning preferences, which is visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So it was really good to have some tools in my back pocket for planning for activities. And then collaboration is key. We always want to collaborate. So if we're trying to encourage students to collaborate, why wouldn't facilitators collaborate amongst our program to come up with activities?
And this is a great way to, again, to not become overwhelmed, because you have other people's perspectives, and you're able to, like, if you have difficulty with it, coming up with an activity for a certain topic that your class is going through right now. And as Erica had mentioned, like, you can ask someone who's already been there and done that and what they did, and that might help you like better navigate how you want to run your sessions for that particular topic. So planning ahead. Erica had mentioned this a bit before, but especially if you're a list-oriented person, I know people who set blocks of time throughout the week to plan. So because you have 2 sessions a week, 2 blocks of time should suffice. If you're not a list-oriented person, then making it a habit by making it a routine, that has helped me, because I'm not really a list-oriented person. If I have blocks of time throughout the day that I schedule specifically for a different topic, that makes me very stressed and I wind up just not doing it. But if I have like a little sticky note with like stuff that I need to get done at a certain point, and I can decide what that certain point is, but what's the due date, that helps me. Also planning ahead for session materials. So if you're bringing Play-Doh to session, I know one activity that I love to do with regards to cellular respiration is using beads and having them go through that process as like an electron, where the bead is the electron, or worksheets. I don't know if I just said that, but if you plan for these different things, make sure that you bring them to your session. And again, it will look a bit different if you have an online student than an in-person student. If you're using beads, if you're using Play-Doh, if you're using worksheets. And that's also areas that you may want to consider thinking about when you're planning for that hybrid model. And if you have any questions on how to prepare for that, you can always ask people who are returners who have experience planning for the hybrid model, or the mentors who have experience planning for the hybrid model, and that might also help ease some stress off of you.
Okay, as I mentioned before, for trial and error, be strategic with your planning. I had tackled a Jeopardy activity for a final review, and I should have put it before the actual final review. It was okay, it just wasn't the best. And I guess the template, like where I got the template from, I wasn't like the best at navigating that. And so, know your strengths and weaknesses. Like, if you know how to make a Jeopardy well, you have a great template, go for it. But Kahoot does the same thing. You're testing the students, you're reviewing, time like that. And so incorporate stuff like this throughout the semester, just at random times, to practice this and get better if that's something that you want to use as in a review session before a test or before the final or something like that. And obviously it's encouraged to make your own worksheets, all your own. I know for anatomy, you have to identify a lot of structures. And so your own way of how you want to identify that, your own games, whatever, that's great. But also in teams, we have resources for all facilitators for all courses that we have of past activities. And you don't have to use it like actually verbatim. You can go in there and be like, okay, I like that idea, and I'm going to change it around for my course or whatever you want. So obviously, we are going to encourage creativity, but if this is just something that you need more time on, like to work out, just go with what you know how to do. And that way we can get through the Kahoot and the review session. And then after that test, you can do a Jeopardy in the middle. So.
And also, I think Oscar had mentioned this yesterday, but for people who are returners this is your first day of training, just a reminder, regardless of where you get your worksheets from, whether you get it from Teams, I think it's on Teams, yes, okay, or if you get it online, always make sure that you go through each of the questions so you know what the answer is, because it's really a fun time when you're in session and you did not do that, and then you have no idea what the answer was because you didn't go through it, and maybe you're being observed that day, or it's really stressful for you, and you have no idea because you didn't go through it in advance, so you don't know how to like navigate that situation because you didn't do it. And that happens, and that's okay. But to save yourself that stress, it's important to look over what the answers are and how they got the answers to that worksheet, especially if it's like a math problem where you have to have like a process as opposed to just having an answer. Like something like biology might just have an answer, but it's not the case for every single course.
I'll also add real quick with that, with the dual modality that we're doing, sometimes you're going to run into technology issues. And if you have some technology issues and you have students trying to join online and they just aren't able to participate due to those technology issues, it is going to be required that you reach out to those students and say like, hey, so sorry about the technology issues. This is kind of what we did in session, and attach those worksheets and those solutions because they did make that effort to attend session and try and participate, but because of those difficulties, they weren't able to. So having those attached to your planning is just super important. Just wanted to add that in. Sorry to interrupt. Doing great.
Thank you for adding that in. I think that is very important for people to understand and know about. All right, so how to not take up so much time when planning. Planning, what we're looking, first of all, when we're looking at planning, because people do look through your planning, we're not looking for like 1 to 2 sentences, especially in the content portion, which is an area that new facilitators and haven't gone through that process before. And again, it's a process, it's a learning experience. So you grow and you learn from it. But we're not looking for 1 to 2 sentences. That's not really acceptable because that's not, if someone needed to go in and to substitute for you for whatever reason, how could they run a session off of 1 to 2 sentences, especially if they were the only facilitator available, but they are in a different topic. Like I would have a very difficult time facilitating for a math class because I don't have as much experience in math. That being said, that's where planning from the beginning of this came from, but also the beginning of this PowerPoint, but also talking about saving time when planning so that you don't have to spend 2 hours writing a whole paragraph for your content section, because that takes a lot of time and you might not have that time available in your day. So here are ways that can help you with that. One is to brainstorm. We mentioned this before with collaboration because that is very helpful. You can brainstorm with your professor, you can brainstorm with other people who are facilitating for the same topic. You can brainstorm with your mentor, your mentor group. You can also brainstorm with the students, not during session, but before or after session. You can ask them, hey, did these activities work for you? Did you like any of them? Are there any that you would like to see again? So that what will best serve those students. Also, use your resources. They're there for a reason. And they are not only there to help you navigate how to plan, but also to save yourself time when you're planning and save yourself stress. Also, work smarter, not harder. So just finding ways to help your future self succeed and while still maintaining a high quality planning sheet. So big brain moments. Brainstorm when taking notes in class. These are 2 things that I always do and that always really, really, really help me. So when you're in class and you're taking notes, I know that you have already taken this class before, but I highly recommend continuing to take notes for the class because different teachers may teach different things, or you can annotate your past notes, but take notes. When you're taking notes, you've already taken the class before, you know what's important, you know the key points, you know the key terms. So highlight those key concepts that you already know will most likely be on the exam and that the students should know maybe for an upper level class. I know I did biology 1107. I facilitated for that class before, which is the first biology class that you take. And there's a very small portion over genetics, but if you're a biology major, you have to take a whole class over genetics. So there are certain topics that they will see again. And me being someone who has already taken genetics knows that they will see this information again. So I want to make sure not only that they are successful in the class that they're in right now, but that they have a solid foundation for future classes that they will take long after I've seen them. So highlighting those key concepts also helps you know where to cater that activity towards. Okay, I want to cater this activity towards areas of the brain maybe. And you know that because those are the key concepts that you highlighted. Another thing is writing notes in class. I always try to think about how these different notes, that was not worded properly. Pretend that was. How these notes can be transformed into an activity. So if there's something like bone structures, well, you can make Play-Doh structures. You can make structures out of Play-Doh with these bones and have people guess what they are. And that's also a kinesthetic way or kinesthetic activity and a great learning method for learning different bones of the body. And so if I think about that when I'm writing my notes, I might write that in the margins of the page, main activity, bones with Play-Doh, or memory game with whatever these terms are, and so on and so forth. So I do this. It helps me every single time. This is probably, if I was to give you guys any advice at all, this is what I'd want you to take away from my personal experience because it helps me significantly. Not only does it help me prepare for planning, but it also helps me when I am planning because I already have notes on what I can write out. So I'm not thinking of stuff right off the bat long after I've been in that class. Later that day when I'm really tired, I already have a plan, and that's very helpful.
All right, so excuse me, resources everywhere. So obviously y'all are kind of an information overload with Teams and all the resources that are available to you there, but you will get all semester to use them, work through it. You'll have it all the time. And so personally, starting out last semester, I would always open up Teams and have my resources open, like the list of CLTs and what each one is used. I would always have that open while I was writing like my lesson plan for it, because why, like, just have it there. So it's like, oh, okay, this would best fit this activity that I want and all this stuff. So you can do multiple. You select one CLT for an activity, but it's possible to have two different CLTs work for the same activity, but whichever one you want to run that activity under is what you're going to select on your planning. So that's just, there's not a right or wrong answer in that sense. So it's whatever you want to run the activity under. And yep, resources are pre-made, but make sure to work through them before session so you know the answers. Also want to make a little note that by probably week 1, week 2, you will become very comfortable with UNG Connect, and it's a fun time. It's really great. But I would always open up a Word document and write out my planning, like literally look at the UNG Connect form of what, like where I would put planning in, and copy that same exact term over, like the content. I was like opening content, and then I'd write what I would put under, because when you save drafts to UNG Connect, they don't always save. So you have your planning right there for you, and you can always go back and look at it. So have that open while you're writing out your plan. And then I would literally copy what I wrote for the content and paste it into the UNG Connect form and submit that. So have all of those documents open while you're planning, so that way you don't have to go back and forth and try to remember, oh, this is what this CLT meant and all that stuff. And also in the manual, there are great ideas for activities, and there is a certain page that I can't remember the number of off the top of my head that I would use all the time. So it would be like, these are really good opening activities, these are really good examples of main activities, stuff like that. So just have those out when you're planning to help you work harder. I mean, work smarter, not harder.
Honestly, you could do both, but okay, there we go. So save yourself time before and during planning. So I'm going to go with the last bullet point first. Save a portion of planning for last if you cannot think of anything in the moment. So for example, I'm a tiny bit scatterbrained, but it's like an organized chaos, if that makes any sense up here. So for me, rarely do I ever plan opening, main 1, main 2, and closing. Usually it's like, okay, main 1, okay, closing. Oh, now, okay, main 2. Okay, now opening. Like it's never in order. I don't even know if I can think of a time where I've ever planned in order. And that may bother you in your own personal life. When you're planning, you may have to do it in order because you're just a very meticulous person like that. But what I'm trying to say is that do what works best for you. So if you cannot really think of an opening, but you have a great idea for a main 1 and you want to write out the main 1 because you have this idea and you want to make sure that like you write it down before you forget, maybe it's like a checks for understanding question that you think of for that activity that you had planned out before. Then plan for that first. And if you can't think of an opening activity right off the bat, like save it for last. Don't submit the planning sheet without having planned for the opening, but know that you can save it for last. You could go in between pages and that's okay, whatever works best for you. Note that if you ever do step away from your computer and you have it, you can, okay, let's redo that sentence. Know that if you ever step away from your computer, maybe to take a walk and a breather, just to get your thoughts circulating, make sure to save it as a draft or put it into a Word document, because as Erica had mentioned, UNG Connect can be really fun sometimes and not in the good way. So to save yourself tears and tissues, because that costs money and you should put that money towards food, make sure that your work is saved in a secure area so you don't have to redo it all. Something that I do that's very, I think it's very helpful for your future self, but you need to like build up for it. So it's not immediate gratification, but later you'll experience that later. I don't know if gratification is the right word, but what I suggest you do is for every activity that you plan for, copy and paste the content portion of that activity into a Word document. Because while we encourage you to try different activities and definitely do not do the same activity within the same week, sometimes you might have a heads up game and you might do this heads up game or plan for this heads up game like 2-3 times a semester. And so it's really nice if you have that already, that content portion, which takes the absolute most amount of time when you're planning. You already have that saved somewhere so you can copy and paste it and modify it for that actual session. So for example, I know a lot of people like using 2 truths and a lie in their opening or closing. Instead of constantly rewriting what two truths and a lie is in that content portion and what you are planning for the students to do, you could just copy and paste into a Word document. And then if you use it again later on in the semester, you could just copy and paste that content into your planning so you don't have to take up so much time doing that. So this next slide that I'm going to show before I go to it, I need to preface this, is an example of one of the activities that I copied and pasted into a Word document. It is kind of long. I think it's important for people to know that I'm very meticulous with my planning. Like I go into a bit more detail than might be necessary. So yours doesn't have to be this long in the content portion, but make sure that it's not 1 to 2 sentences. So here's an example for me with a Teach It Back, which is a main. I took a screenshot of this, which is why it's a bit blurry. But what I did was for this Teach It Back, I remember this was over, what was I talking about? Diseases. And I talked about 4 different groups of diseases. I had talked about tuberculosis, influenza, HIV, and malaria. Not that those are important for you to know right now, but essentially what I did is, assign each group of students to be responsible for either, and then those 4 different diseases. I deleted those 4 different diseases and put a blank because if I was to use a Teach It Back again, we would have already have moved on with the course material. I wouldn't be talking about those 4 different diseases. I might be talking about different topics. Maybe I'm assigning in a different semester or for another semester and still have this Word document saved, but I'm assigned for a different course. Well, I'm not going to be talking about diseases if I'm talking about a different course that's not medical microbiology. So I have an underline thing there. So that's an area that I know, okay, I need to modify this for this particular planning sheet. And so I don't just leave like these tuberculosis, whatever, if I'm planning for like a chemistry class, because that would make absolutely no sense. So anything that's underlined is areas that I can change. Everything that is not underlined or has like the underline thingy on it are things that I don't need to change. Those are things that stay consistent throughout every Teach It Back that I do. So instead of having to write out all of that every single time, I only have to fill out those 4 different underlined areas, which saves me a lot of time. And hopefully that would save you a lot of time as well. So going down to the second paragraph that I have for things that I expect, if you do a Teach It Back, you'll find out real quick that students, unless you tell them not to do this like directly, they'll probably like read off their notes, which is not going to help them. So I always have like, here's what I'm expecting you to do. And for 3, 4, 5, and 6, that's specific for diseases. Again, I might not be talking about diseases in another Teach It Back. So that's underlined because I might get rid of it or I might change it up for whatever content or context I'm using this activity in. So the main thing I want you to take away from this is that, yes, this seems like a lot, but I only wrote it out once. And then every other time I copied and pasted it and just filled in the blanks to help me get that content for that session. And this way your planning is still very high quality. If you're looking back at this, at your planning, you can read through it really easily, understand, okay, what am I doing? And if someone was a substitute for you, they would be able to read this and understand what they were doing in detail. This is not 1 to 2 sentences long. This is way more than that. And it's high quality planning, but it's planning that I don't have to spend so much time on every single time I do a Teach It Back. So I highly recommend you do this. And again, if you're a new facilitator, you're not going to immediately get the reward of doing this because it'll be your first time like planning it out, but it definitely saves time. And I still usually take an hour planning even when I do this because I go into a lot of detail in other areas of planning as well. So it allows you to save time for those other areas too. All right, so I know that we have 15 minutes left and we wanted to open this up to a Q&A. So if you have any questions for Erica or I, or if you have any ideas that you want to include, if you're a returner or if you're a new facilitator and have any ideas on what helps you not be stressed and plan, please feel free to talk right now. You can raise your hand, unmute yourself, put it in the chat. I'm going to rely on Erica if anything's in the chat or if anyone's hand's raised.
Anna, go for it.
So you mentioned like using Play-Doh, and I've used it in a couple of my activities. And usually my go-to for like alternatives for online students is to draw instead of modeling like with Play-Doh. Do you have any like other alternative like activities for online students? Because you can't physically use the Play-Doh, but just ways to keep them included.
My go-to is also drawing it out, so I'm trying to think of a different thing. It's really difficult with Play-Doh, you're right. Oh, something I did do in the past is, and this doesn't always work, so anyways, usually I'll have them take like, if they have sticky notes, typically students are in their dorm, not always, but usually they have at least like their backpack around them and they might have sticky notes or flashcards. So this doesn't always work depending on the structure, but I have them like take pieces of paper and like crumple them up and like make structures with that crumbled up piece of paper or fold it in different ways for them to make that structure because they don't have the Play-Doh with them. Again, that doesn't always work. So drawing it out is definitely a great way to have online students do that. And thank you for mentioning that. That's something that you should add in your planning as well when you're preparing for online and in-person students. If anyone else has anything like to answer Anna's question though, like I'd love to hear that too.
I think like maybe you could also do a thing where like you have the students who are in like actually physically at the session, you could have them have the Play-Doh and like, sorry, I just said Play-Doh, I don't know how I said that, but you could let them like explain how to make something and then have the people who have the Play-Doh actually like use it to like make it. Like I was thinking specifically for biology, like there's a lot of diagrams or like physical representations of things that like I really struggled with recently in genetics, but also probably in 1108, 1107 you could use it for. And just having that like visual representation would really help.
Also, for anyone who's going into biology 1107, if you're talking about the fluid mosaic model, using Play-Doh as an activity to like make that is very helpful. And if you ever use Play-Doh in session, what I always do, and I recommend you do as well, for anyone, is to allow your students to like just play with it in their hands throughout session because it could help calm them down, especially if it's around like a test review time. I always bring Play-Doh for my students so that they can just like do something with their hands to like de-stress.
Hey, Caitlin, in the chat, Aaron asked, what is a good way to handle when students are really struggling and redirecting questions and wait times start to take up most of the time for the activity?
That's a great question. Would anyone like to, does anyone have any ideas on how to answer Aaron's question? Because there are a lot of different ways to answer that.
I can start us off at least. With that, I would take that as a sign to maybe take just like a moment to think about the activity itself and think about like the content, because if they are really struggling, that could mean that either maybe like they weren't ready for this activity or that content, but it could also mean that your students aren't prepared. So like we were talking about earlier, we have to hold our students accountable. And so just like we sit in the class so we know where they should be at in class. So if this is something that the students aren't struggling with, like letting them know like, hey, that's okay. I recognize you aren't here with that. like ready to kind of go this deep into the material yet. But just so you know, like this is where like doctor or professor, whoever like is expecting us to be. So we are going to continue to move on in class. So this is going like, I'm going to have to kind of modify some things to make us like be able to do session today. But like going forward, you're going to want to focus more on this outside of session so that you'll be caught up as we continue to progress. You know, like I said, classes continue on whether our students are studying outside or being prepared. So when students aren't coming prepared to session, it is okay to kind of point out like, you know, this is where our professor is expecting us to be. Like like I said, it's okay that you aren't there right now, but just know like this is something that you will need to put more time and effort into than just coming to session. Like this is something that you'll have to put more effort and time into outside of just SI. And yes, Jenny, we do definitely can refer to tutoring services. They are a great resource, and like that's a great way to explain as well. Like there are some differences between tutoring and SI. So it sounds like you may want a tutor for this specific thing. So definitely feel free to refer to tutoring. And I will stop talking now and let y'all take it back over.
It's a great answer.
Oh, sorry. I see Leah's hand is raised, so go ahead, Leah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you have a session like that where like it feels like everyone is lost and like things are just taking a long time, they're not getting it. I would just try to like first just acknowledge to myself that like this is happening, like they're stuck. And so like the first step is me thinking like, I'm not going to freak out about it. Like you just kind of have to accept that this is what's going on in the session. And then once you like stop panicking or whatever, like just try to slow down and take it a little slower maybe than you had planned. Maybe don't try to get through as many problems. Just kind of take it a little bit slower and, you know, still do all of the parts of session, but maybe you won't get through as much, and that's okay. As long as they are getting something out of it and you're still trying to follow the SI model, you know, it may not go the way you think it will, but they can still get something out of it.
Yeah, and I think it also depends on what class you have specifically, like what kind of content, because again, a chemistry class is going to be like the session is going to be run differently than a psychology or a history class. So Erin, I think you're psychology. So for psychology, you know, a lot of things build off of each other, and you're not going to have like a whole activity that's based around probably like filling out all these like equations. So sometimes what I do is if I know it will come up later in the activity or the session, I might say, you know, I understand that we're stuck right now due to time. We're going to leave it as is, and we will come back to it later if we have the time. If not, I have bonus hours at this time, and the professor has office hours at this time. Highly recommend reaching out to them or, you know, emailing them. So providing them resources just like tutoring services may help as well.
Exandria, is that how you say your name?
It's Xandria, but I also go by Zan. How do you plan ahead for the week as far as your sessions go without getting ahead of the material being learned in class? I'm not sure if that exactly makes sense. Like, are we going to be looking ahead in the syllabus to say, okay, for this Tuesday, Thursday class, on Thursday, we're going to go over this material in the lecture. So my Friday session, or, you know, my Thursday afternoon session, or however that's planned out. So we know how to plan that without having to wait until, you know, going through that lecture.
So there are many ways that you can approach that, and I've definitely done that in the past if I'm very comfortable with the class and I know it's going to be coming up. I also, if you do that, I highly recommend talking with the professor as well, like making a rough draft plan is what I call it, of what to expect in the future for the next week, because usually at the beginning of every week, I tell the students, this is the main topic of this session, and this is the main topic of this next session this week. And we haven't talked about the second session material yet. That will be that'll be talked about earlier in the week, but just so that they're aware. And I make a little rough draft about it with the professor. So that has helped me, but I recommend personally to actually getting down and planning, doing that after you've been introduced to the material in that class. But other people may have something else to say that works for them or that they suggest as well.
Abula, did you have something to add? I saw your hand was raised. I don't know if you took it away or not.
Oh, sorry, you kind of mentioned it. I was going to suggest speaking with a professor as well, so you have that ahead. And like you mentioned, that you showed us that little manual script that you had on there. Even without the content, you have an idea of what you would like your session to look like. And when you do have that content information, you can just input it into your, rough draft sketch, as you mentioned.
Does anyone else have anything to add to that question?
I guess I do. This kind of defeats the purpose of planning ahead, but usually I'm one class lecture behind in my session, so that by the time they're coming to the session to go over the material, a day has if I have a Tuesday, Thursday class and I have a session right after my Thursday class, like you said, that Thursday session will usually go over Tuesday content, and then just so that the students can have a little time to sit there and process it, because sometimes going through class, it's oh my gosh, I don't understand any of this. And they can look at their notes. And then by the time they come to session, you kind of avoid a lot of the floundering around trying to know, because it's brand new material. So that's my way of avoiding the situation. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
I highly recommend what Anna did too, because that is very beneficial for them.
Connie, I see your hand, but Mirelli asked a question before you. So in the chat, if your regular students in session really enjoy a specific activity and it fits the subject material well, is it acceptable to reuse that activity every week or is that too often? I'm gonna go out on a limb here and say that every week is too often, I think. Maybe, I don't know. Well, actually, I'm going to let somebody else answer that with more experience, because I don't know if that is too often or not. I don't know.
I was about to say, I think that that's a great question for Oscar, Sarah, or Emily to answer.
I would say every week is too often. And part of the reason for that is just that we try, sometimes, sometimes we don't know what works best for us. So if we're using that activity every single week and we aren't trying new activities or putting in new activities, there may be something that works better for that student or that they like more than that activity. But definitely you can use it every couple of weeks, if and it becomes one of those things where it's if they know they're getting it every week, it's okay. But if you're hey, I know y'all love Super Tic-Tac-Toe, we're gonna play that tomorrow, it kind of gets some excitement towards that as well. So also kind of while I'm talking, these are great questions. Please, we're taking notes. I'm taking notes of the questions in the chat. So if we didn't get to your question, that's okay. You can send it to me, put it in the chat. But we do have to move on so that we can have our guest speakers coming in to talk to us. So right now we are about to have, I think it's Student Accessibility Services come first. Yes. So Student Accessibility Services and Counseling come talk to us. Returners, you got this talk last semester. You are more than welcome to stay, but just know that if you do leave right now, this talk will be recorded. And if anything has changed or been updated since last semester, you will be required to watch that talk. Emily, did I miss anything? Sarah, did I miss anything? Want to add anything?
No, that's it. The same goes for not only Student Accessibility Services presentation, but also for counseling. So again, you're welcome to stay and get paid also to stay, or again, if we notice some changes and updates from those two departments from last semester's presentation, we will require you to watch those. So it's completely up to you. If you do leave, then your day is done and we will see you tomorrow, returners. Oscar, for some reason, I can't see the admit button right now. Do you mind go ahead and letting Dr. Hill Harris in?
I will.
All right, everyone. So we are about to transition into our next presentation. I think I can't see your face, Dr. Hill Harris, but I think you're here now. So welcome. Thank you for being here with us. We are going to go into the student accessibility service presentation, and we have about 30 minutes for this presentation. So please give your undivided attention, facilitators and SI leaders, and take notes as usual, and feel free to ask questions as well. And I will turn it over to you, Candace, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Emily. Hello, everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen really quickly. See if I could start from the beginning here. All right. So hello. First of all, thank you guys for your service, because what you do helps a lot of students who struggle in those historically difficult courses. So we really do appreciate you guys volunteering and helping all of the students here at UNG. So I appreciate you if no one else does. I know Emily and Sarah does as well. My name is Dr. Candace Hill Harris, and I'm the Associate Director for Student Accessibility Services. I actually now supervise the Gainesville campus as well as the Cumming campus, but interim wherever they need me, to be honest. So you will see me probably on all 5 of the campuses, not in Blue Ridge as much, but you just never know. You know, it's definitely wherever there's a need. All right. See here. And like I said, I am located on the Gainesville campus. So because I have been the assistant director on the Dahlonega campus, I am very familiar with that campus as well. So if there's ever questions and things like that, please don't hesitate to call me, even though I may not be as close as I used to be. But now we have Zoom and Teams, so there's no excuse for not being able to get in contact with someone these days. But what do we do? So student accessibility services provides accommodations to those who have had or have a mental and or physical impairment. Now, these disabilities that we accommodate can be both temporary and or permanent. And what I mean by that is, say, for example, someone has a chronic illness and they know it's probably going to be something that affects them for the rest of their lives. That will be more than likely to fall under the permanent category. However, like someone who maybe gets some sort of concussion or breaks a limb, those may be considered temporary accommodations. So we can provide temporary accommodations based on that individual's medical documentation. And sometimes when it's clear that someone's broken their ankle or their leg or something like that, of course, we provide accommodations as well, because we know how difficult it can be at times to get documentation. We are dedicated to ensure that every student has an equal opportunity. And what I think of is, when we provide accommodations, it puts that student on a level playing field with other students, and it allows them to have that extra support to be successful in college. Now, I'm going to go over these slides. It's very few, but but Emily sent some things to touch on, and I'm going to go over those as well once I'm done with these few slides. But what are accommodations? Accommodations are provided based on documentation. So like I said earlier, that individual will need to bring in something from a licensed professional, whether it's a medical physician or a licensed psychologist. And those accommodations are not a one size fits all. We want to make sure that we look at the needs and the strengths of that individual, and that looks different. So, for example, if two students walk in with maybe Crohn's disease or something like that, we're not going to give them the same accommodations just because we have this prescribed list for for one individual. It may be totally different for another student that's walking into our office. So we make sure that we look at accommodations on an individual basis, not individualized basis. So it's not just giving, each student with the same maybe diagnosis, the same thing, because everybody's unique. So provisional accommodations are a little bit different. Basically, sometimes students come in with vague documentation, and because of that, we want to give them um, s- some sort of accommodations while they're here, because we don't want them to have an uphill battle. So we may say, hey, this documentation doesn't tell us everything, but we can provide these accommodations for the semester. So within that semester, try to get to your doctor and get the documentation that is required to get permanent accommodations, which will extend to the time that they graduate. And then also our temporary accommodations, I went over that. We've had several students who utilized temporary accommodations, and then some students who struggled because they didn't know that that was a thing. I've seen students, and I may have seen them on crutches or something, and I'm like, did you visit our office? Just because I want to make sure that the student knows that if they're, maybe they're on crutches or something, and this is temporary, possibly we can give them a flexibility with tardies so they're not penalized for getting to class late, because their traveling time may be a little bit more, it may be a little bit longer due to the fact that they're on crutches or whatever the case may be. That's just an example. So some of the accommodations that we can provide would be class notes, alternative media, which is basically having the ability to use an electronic book, extra testing time, being able to use formula sheets, as well as priority registration. And we offer priority registration typically for students who have extra time on their exams, or maybe a student, they may take medication and it kicks in later on in the day and it makes them sleepy, so they're more attentive in the mornings, things like that. We want to provide them with the ability to mold their schedule so that they can utilize that extra testing time, or to be able that they're able to function in their classes as well and still be successful. You may have, if you live in the residence hall, you may have seen students with emotional support, emotional support animals, or service animals. Service animals are considered a right through the ADA. Now, emotional support animals are actually approved under the Federal Housing Act for individuals with disabilities. So that's usually, students who may struggle with, and this is just a few examples, maybe have anxiety or depression, or maybe some sort of yeah, like a lot of our students typically with emotional support animals typically fall in that category, but there's other categories as well. And then also disability related absences. This is not the easiest accommodation to get. You definitely have to have a letter from the physician that indicates, hey, due to this, the student may need to miss classes. And really, the disability related absence is an agreement between the student and the faculty member. Basically, they decide how many more days can you miss in this class and still be successful. We don't want to penalize a student if they miss like two more classes than the faculty member allotted, but they had an A in the course. And it wasn't that they didn't want to be there, it's just that their disability didn't allow for them to be there. So that's kind of how that accommodation works. And also, how would I refer someone to SAS? And this is not only something that, you as a student leader will ask. I actually did a presentation. There's a faculty member who said, hey, so if there's a student in my class, it can be quite sensitive. However, one of the things that I suggest is that you give the student the opportunity to explain the situation from their perspective. And if the student represents a long-term or widespread condition, ask them, have you considered SAS? However, if they don't, give you that much information, let them know that there are a number of available resources. There's tutoring, there's the academic support center, there's the writing center, counseling services. Those things can be, um, you know, and this, you can inform the student about those things so that they don't feel like, oh, they're just pinpointing SAS instead of, everything else that could potentially be used for that student to be successful. It's important, if you are registering with SAS, that is a typo, I need to fix that. It's important that you register early. Now, is there a deadline? No. So say for instance, there was some sort of developing medical condition and there was no diagnosis. Now you got one, it's now April. If you get that documentation to us and the disability itself does allow for you to be granted some accommodations, you can give that accommodation letter to the faculty member at that particular point. But the reason why we say register early is because we want to make sure that you have everything that you need before the classes actually start. We want to make sure that when you walk into the door, you have it all, and there's no scrambling, there's no anxiety due to you having to get everything, and there's an uphill battle. So the earlier, the better. And definitely that's something to communicate to some of the students that you tutor. And also, you can begin your registration with our department, and our website is here. I can share my presentation after I'm done if I hadn't already, or contact the director that's based on your campus. We have had a few changes with our department. I actually moved over to the Gainesville campus after being on the Dahlonega campus for almost 6 years to the associate director position. However, Tracy May is on the Dahlonega campus and she's the assistant director there. She's fabulous. As well as the Oconee campus, Rachel Pender is the assistant director, and she's been there about as long as I've been working with SAS. And then Thomas McCoy is the director for student accessibility services, and he supervises the large Blue Ridge campus, where but he's basically based on the Gainesville campus. So whenever he has an appointment, he'll drive up to Blue Ridge. I wanted to go over some of the questions that Emily, or some of the bullets that she had, and I had it up, I swear. Okay, so we already went over that. Oh, so like when it comes to breaking down barriers and some of the misconceptions of student accessibility services, a lot of students will ask, hey, so like, will this go on my transcript? Or are these accommodations considered confidential? Yes. So, okay, no and yes. No. Will you ever see that someone had accommodations on their transcript? That is illegal. And also the process is confidential. And we also go over with the faculty member that once the semester is over, that they should shred the accommodation letter if they printed it out, that your accommodation should be considered confidential between you and that professor. It shouldn't be shared with any other professor unless you share it with the next professor, even if they fall within the same department. You can decide when and if you want to utilize your accommodations. And I think I talked. Oh, and another thing too, I know that a lot of you are doing some online learning as well. Um, there aren't any necessarily any best practices per se. One of the things that I suggest is for not just for students who may let you know that they have accommodations, but for any student, ask them the best way that they, the best way that they learn. What are they a visual learner? Like ask them what works for them. That's usually a way to figure out the best practice for each individual student. I can't really say that there would be best practices for certain disabilities and things like that. Like I said, each person is an individual. They're super unique. So you want to make sure that when you approach them, when it comes to their learning styles, allow them to explain to you what works for them and try your best to adjust to that student. And yeah, so that's pretty much it. Do you guys have any questions at all? Summer, did you have a question?
Yes,
Hey.
I have a question. I know service dogs are probably the most popular, but do you allow for other animals as well on campus?
On campus, it has to be a service animal on campus. I never say never because laws change all the time. So as far as emotional support animals or something like that being on campus, we will take it through we'll go through the protocol, the procedures for that. But for the most part, we have not been able to approve an emotional support animal in the classroom. But a service animal is considered a right of a student, and it's also like an extension of that individual as well.
Okay, just wondering. Thank you.
No problem. All right. So if you guys don't have any questions, or let me check the chat. Is there anything? There's nothing in the chat, right, Emily? Okay, well, obviously I did a fabulous job. So if you guys need me, please don't hesitate to call me. I am probably one of the easiest people. God, I can't even talk today. I'm at home, so obviously I'm using slang. So I am, you can talk to me. You can ask me questions. If you're ever on the fence about how to refer a student or talk to a student about something, call me. I'll be more than happy to work through the process with you. We can figure it out together. So, all right. Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you. Thanks for being here and taking time out of your Friday.
Oh, not a problem, which is so funny. Everybody in my house has COVID except for me. But according to the CDC, I don't know if y'all know this, but it's been 6 months since I had my shot. I didn't get the booster yet. So if it's been 6 months since you had your shot and you've been directly, if you made direct exposure to someone, you have to quarantine for 5 days as well. So yeah, I'm quarantining. So even though I'm negative, but that's something, just so you know, it just changed. And literally the nurse, she was like, oh, actually you have to quarantine too, when I was at the doctor. So yeah, so I'm here. And like I said, I'll be in the office hopefully Monday. So call me then. All
Sounds
right.
good. Thank you so much for being here with us. Let me ask you actually real quick. I just thought of something. Do you need any, is it called Peer Mentors this semester? Should I share that flyer that you sent me last semester?
I believe we have a new flyer.
Okay.
But yeah, let me tell you about the peer mentor program. So a lot of our students come in, maybe they just need more of a social piece, or maybe a little bit more support from I wouldn't say a friend, but a mentor, someone who can maybe tell them a good teacher or the best places to eat, or possibly have a coffee with them from time to time. We definitely look for mentors each semester. and it doesn't take a lot of your time. It's just a few contacts throughout the semester. But you know, I don't know if you guys remember when you were freshmen. At some points, I'm sure you were wondering about certain things, but how great is it to be able to pick up the phone and call someone to ask them, like, hey, you know, should I go and eat here? Because, you know, or whatever. It's just nice to have that social support. And like I said, I try to take the word friend out of it, but we won't, like, you know, push you away if a friendship brews. We would love that. But definitely, if you have the time, please volunteer, and I will send you some flyers, Emily, so that you can share with everybody.
Thank you so much.
No problem. Have a good day, guys. Enjoy the rest of your orientation.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. All right, everyone. I think we have like what, 5 minutes? No. To 1:45.
Yeah.
Is that correct on the? Yeah, I just didn't have my schedule up. 1:45. So we have, let's say, 8 minutes until then. If anybody is, again, returners, would love for you to stay, especially if you stayed for the SAS presentation. Love for you to stay for counseling. And you can take like an 8-minute break right now. Just be back and engaged for the next one, especially new people. Thank you so much. Sarah and Oscar, did you two get lunch today?
I did.
Okay, good. Sarah, did you eat lunch today? You're a funny person. I'm gonna go grab a snack because I didn't eat yet, but I wanted to make sure that y'all were taking care of yourself. All right, I'm gonna go just grab a snack. All right, everyone. We're about to get started. Okay, everyone, our next presentation is from Counseling Services. We're really happy. Hi, Simon, Dr. Corey, good to see you. We're going to talk about counseling services and give you some good tips for your role, and then also the services that are available to you all as students at the university and as leaders. So I will just go ahead and turn it right over to you. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Sure, Emily, in typical Simon Cordery fashion, I just choked on water like 10 seconds ago. So please forgive me. I'm going to cough a little bit at the beginning of this presentation.
Totally. It's totally fine.
Great. I didn't prepare a PowerPoint because I wanted to make sure that I made this, up to date, have a discussion about, what our services are at this point, and leave time for you guys to ask questions so that you guys are really getting what you need from this. So I'll start by telling you a little bit about student counseling. We have offices on every campus except for Blue Ridge. And Blue Ridge students can access video services on the Dahlonega campus as long as they are not suicidal, threatening violence to other people, or self-injuring. In all those other cases, we're going to need somebody on the ground there in Blue Ridge to address that. We have a relationship with Georgia Mountain Health, which is just literally, a mile up the road there at Blue Ridge. But all the other campuses, we have licensed professional counselors, which are master's level. And I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I'm the director. And I've been here for 10 years. I came here as a practicum student in 2006. And so I've had a long relationship with UNG. That's when I knew I wanted to work with college students, and I love being here. Student counseling has, we offer all the services that a regular counseling psychologist office would out in the real world, except we don't offer testing for learning disorders or ADHD. That requires like a whole day, sometimes more than a day, of testing batteries, which are very intricate and very expensive. We just don't have the time or the expertise to do that. We do have a relationship with the Regents Center for Learning Disorders at UGA, and there's some other locations throughout the state that can do that at a reasonable cost, and they're the ones that set the accommodations for students anyway. We are paid for by state funds. We're not paid for as part of tuition. We're not paid for as part of the student health fee or activity fee. The budget for student counseling comes directly from the state as part of the yearly allocation. So I guess you could say your tax dollars, right? We don't charge for services. As far as at least clinical services, we do offer a basics alcohol education class at $100 cost for that class. That's usually something that if you get caught drinking, that's one of the things that you have to do when your conduct sanction comes down. But that's not providing therapy, that's a class, that's different. We don't charge for therapeutic services. We are confidential. Everything we say and do with you in session is completely confidential. We're not going to tell anybody. I'm not going to tell Emily. I'm not going to tell your mom. I'm not going to tell the dean. I'm not going to tell the NSA, but they probably already know anyway, right? So I want to be clear that there are 3 exceptions to me keeping things confidential. If somebody comes to me that is saying, no matter what you say or do, I'm going to end my life and there's nothing you can do to help me, I'm going to tell somebody because I want to keep them safe, right? If somebody comes and says, I am aware of a abuse currently of a child, an elderly person, or a handicapped person, I'm going to tell somebody because I want to keep those people safe, right? And that's currently not from like, hey, I'm now 19 and this happened to me when I was 3. That we can talk about all day. But if it's about somebody who's currently a minor or in danger, there's going to be a report. And finally, if you're in a court case and the judge thinks that your mental health is a key component of that case, they can do a court order. And if I don't comply, I go to jail, and I wouldn't make it on the inside. All right. So I'm going to comply and turn those records over. Those are the only 3 reasons. If you want me to write a letter to your professor or, somebody, I'm happy to do that, but you have to give me written permission to do that. So those are the only ways that information leaves the center. We work for you when you come to student counseling. You're the boss. You don't have to do anything we say. And what we're going to do is explore your situation, and we're going to look at what your options are, and you guys get to make up your own mind. All right. We have appointments Monday through Friday, Monday through Thursday, 8 to 5:30, Friday, 8 to 3. And we try to schedule them just standard like a doctor's office. However, we're aware that things sometimes are not standard doctor's office stuff, right? There's a crisis. Like I say, if there's tears, walk in. If there's tears and snot, come running, right? So we want to make sure that people know that if there's an emergency, we're there for them, and they can walk in. We have set times that we've left holes in our schedules where historically we've had most people kind of walk in around those times, and we do a pretty good idea of juggling and funneling people into our schedule that need help immediately. Let's see here. Most of our sessions are, it's just talk therapy. They're short therapy sessions, 1 to 5 to 7 sessions is our standard. We can see people longer, but it just depends on what the student's need is and what our availability is. I would like to be in a situation where we see somebody every week. And we do see some people every week, but most people we see every other week just because of demand for services is so high. And we're trying to do what we can for most people. We don't prescribe medications. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit more about that in a second. I'm a PsyD, which is a doctor of psychology, and you need to be an MD, which is a doctor of medicine in order to write scripts, right? So I'm not that kind of doctor, right? As my brother calls it, he says, you're the fake kind. I said, that's right, I'm the fake kind of doctor. All right, so what I want you to know is that over the past 10 years that I've been the director here, I've seen the demand for clinical services rise, every year. And every year, the number of people that are struggling with suicidality, self-injuring, really serious things rises as well. So not only are we just getting busier, we're getting busier and we're having more intense issues that are coming to our center. And this is not a UNG problem. This is a state and national problem. And as a result of this and the COVID situation, which has caused a lot of isolation, which is really bad for people's mental health, right? The government, the state government has given all 26 USG institutions $12 million. And it's divided up with contracting with a service called Christie Campus Health, which every campus is going to brand that in their own way. We call that Nigel Cares here. They are a large private organization of licensed therapists, and you can call them 24/7, 365 and talk to a licensed therapist in the moment. So whereas if somebody is having a life-threatening emergency, I will gladly get up and get out of my jammies in the middle of the night and come on in. If somebody's having a panic attack or a relationship breakup that's non-life threatening, I really enjoy my sleep. So I'm not going to be available for those type of emergencies in the middle of the night. And that's a great thing that Nigel Cares does. Christie Campus Health is now filling that gap. If people are having a panic attack at 3 o'clock in the morning, then there's somebody there to help them and talk to them. So this is a great way to kind of round out the services that we're offering. You're entitled to 5 visits with, the call doesn't count, right? But after that, you're entitled to 5 visits with a private therapist through Christie Campus Health. And that can be anywhere in the United States. Like, you don't have to be here. It's good if you're, on a school field trip to North Dakota, you can reach a counselor there, which is something I can't do. I can only provide services if you're in the state of Georgia, right? But according to my license. So they've got, being a big organization, they've got some benefits that are really great for our students. The other thing that they offer is, after 5 sessions, you can continue on a fee-for-service basis, or you can come back to student counseling. And either one is fine, but most people within 5 sessions get their needs kind of met, figure out, how to address their issue and move forward. The other thing is the state paid for a block of telepsychiatry, which is people can, for free, have a telemedicine appointment from wherever you guys are sitting right now. You could talk to the psychiatrist and get medication prescribed if you need it. And this is a great reduction it reduces barriers to getting what we need, because there is a shortage of psychiatrists in the state and nation, and people are waiting like 8 weeks, 12 weeks to get an appointment with a psychiatrist, which is not meeting their needs. Not only that, they're expensive, and so having that service provided for free is a good benefit. One of the things I want to make sure you understand is they don't pay for the medication. They pay for the doctor's fees. The medication is up to the student. Most really good mental health psychotropic medications are on the $4 list at Walmart anyway. So if you hear of anybody that's having a cost barrier to their medication, please let me know, because we can work to figure some other stuff out for them. Okay, so finally, we will come out and do talks about student counseling. We will do presentations on healthy relationships, around Valentine's, safe spring break, around spring break. We talk about depression, suicide, eating disorders, whatever, a mental health issue that's important to college students, we can do a presentation on for your class, your group, your club, whatever. You just need to give us about 2 weeks notice, because we tend to stay booked up about 2 weeks out. All right. Emily, did I miss anything as far as our services? I can't think, I think I got everything. Any questions about our services, guys? Okay, so the second part of this was trying to determine what happens when you guys, in your role as supplemental instructors, run into somebody who's either struggling with a mental health issue or discloses a mental health issue to you. And I want to let you know that my general strategy here is one of having good boundaries, right? Knowing that your job is not to fix their problems any more than it is to take their test form and get a good grade, right? But your job is to listen and care, and to let them know what you know. Like, hey, I know that we have some services here that you can take part in, and I thank you for telling me. I'm sorry that you're struggling, but generally you want to move them into a counseling for that, so that you can focus on quadratic equations or whatever particular subject matter that you're trying to get across to the student. There are good boundaries, right? Like, you can listen and be empathic, but remember, it's not your job to fix it for them, and you can't fix it for them. So this brings me to 2 other things I want to make sure I mention. If they are talking about a life-threatening emergency, then definitely you want to call the campus police, not because you're getting them in trouble, they're not going to get arrested, but that's the quickest way to make sure that you're safe and that the student is safe as well. Right. And so I think you should all have in your phone program the number for the campus police. If you're on campus, definitely call our police department, because if you call county and say, hey, I'm in Hogue, the county operator is going to say that's over at the college somewhere. Whereas our people know exactly where to come. I had lunch with the chief earlier the week, our new chief, Chief Williams, and he let me know that 90% of our staff is trained in mental health police work. So they're not somebody who doesn't know anything about mental health. They're actually well-trained, much better than most municipal police forces. So they can come in and help you in that emergency. If somebody tells you they're thinking about quitting, you want to ask more about what do they mean by that? You know, are they quitting school or are they quitting life? And definitely urge them to reach out to other people. And if you know it's serious, make sure that you connect them with police. If it's during the day, you can also walk them over to student counseling, but calling the police is usually the best way to go. Okay, so the other thing is what I would suggest you guys use is called effective listening. Has anybody ever heard of this before? Okay, Caitlin and Grace have. Man, I'll tell you, this is a secret weapon. It has kept me from sleeping on the couch in my marriage more nights than I can tell you, right? This is a great way to de-escalate people, to get people to open up and to figure out what the problem really is. And that's essentially is you ask open-ended questions, right? So if somebody's come to you and saying, I'm just really struggling in this class, tell me what's going on, right? Nice open-ended question. If you said, well, is it this or that? Then you've limited their choices and it might not be either this or that. Does it make sense to everybody? And then what you do when they talk, you're going to listen and you're going to solicit more information. Can you tell me more? What happened then? Right? So you're getting more and more information from them. And some of the stuff they say is not going to be true, right? Like I talked to that Emily cook lady and she told me I didn't have to do this and this is stupid. And that's fine, right? In a previous relationship, I actually sat and said, so what I hear you saying is I'm the worst boyfriend in the history of boyfriends. Did I get that right? She said, oh, good, I did. Okay, right? Agreeing is not, or, you know, reflecting that back, it's not agreeing. Okay, but what you're doing is you're helping that person feel heard. And the thing I've learned about doing therapy is people aren't going to listen to a word I say until they feel heard. Right? And once they feel heard and they go, like they just de-escalated and got it out. And that's your opening to say, okay, here's what I can do to help you. Here's what I suggest you do about that problem that you told me about that I can't help you with. And that's where we move from there. Right? So I would encourage you to look at some effective listening stuff online, watch some YouTubes on it. It's really interesting. Practice it. Man, I'm telling you, in your personal relationships, practice it with your partner. It's amazing, right? Because instead of getting into a fight where now, you know, you're yelling at each other about things that happened in the past, you're actually sitting talking about how do we solve this problem that we're having right now. All right, so I can definitely at a later time come and do more effective listening work with you guys. That's up to Emily and your schedules. All you got to do is just give me a couple weeks notice. But moving on, the final thing I wanted to say is that, you know, your job is a professional, and your job is to have those good boundaries. And, you know, boundary violations start really, really small. Sometimes like your person may bring you a cup of coffee. Hey, I knew we were going to study. I'll bring you a cup of coffee. And then it may be trying to hold your hand or, telling you stuff about their personal life that you don't want to know, right? So keeping good boundaries right up front, it's going to be really important. And remember that nobody should be mistreating you. Nobody should be threatening you. Nobody should be making you feel uncomfortable or anxious. And if that happens, then definitely come tell Emily or come to student counseling and we'll help you too, okay? But know that all the things that I've said about services are available to you guys as well. Your students as well. And so we're here for you. Emily, what else do you feel like I need to talk to these guys about? Did we
I
cover
feel
it?
like you've covered most everything. I would say sometimes as leaders, we think we have to hold it all together, but sometimes as leaders, we take on the most responsibility.
Okay, to be clear, I have my own therapist, right? That being a leader, being a psychologist doesn't mean that we are perfect people. It means that we are doing our best to address our stuff and keep it out of our work lives and our work with other people, right? So definitely, if you're struggling and if you can't, be present and as a instructor, then come talk to us. The other thing that I don't think it's ever happened, but we always talk about like the power struggle in a room. Like if somebody's kind of disrupting your supplemental instruction session, then you want to kind of pull them in after class and say, hey, can you please, stop making jokes or stop, talking on your phone. And there's a way to do that. That's professional. That's, it's assertive, but it's not going to cause a conflict. Whereas if you do that in the middle of class, it's more of a challenge. If you do it in front of witnesses, right, it's more of a challenge. And if you guys have any of those problems, talk about them sooner rather than later so that we can nip them in the bud, as Barney Fife would say. All right. What questions do you guys have? Somebody please ask me a question. I always feel terrible when nobody asks me a question. All right, Anna, thank you.
Yeah, okay, so this kind of has to do with the last thing you just said about like students in session, like getting off topic and you just trying to rein them back in, like in focus. And that's like minorly happened to me like once in a session. And would you say that it, like calls for like after session saying something, or like, is there a way or like ways that you've seen that are useful to like kind of rein people back in without being like confrontational or challenging?
Yeah, in the moment. So you could say things like, okay, guys, remember, we got to focus, we got to concentrate. I want you guys to do well. Remember, hey, you guys are being a little bit loud. Let's focus on what we need to do. And those are things that are just not, calling anybody out, but calling people out. Did that answer your question? It's a little bit about, it's kind of like redirecting a toddler. When the toddler wants to put the peanut butter sandwich into the VCR, oh, we don't have VCRs or those things anymore, do we? But you would go, hey, don't do that. Look over here. Let's do this. Does that make sense? That I have found works best with adults. All right. There was somebody else that had their hand up. Was it Michelle or?
I think it was Murray. Murray, did you have a question? I also see Valerie's hand up.
I did. If we notice one of our students is, going through a hard time emotionally, even if they haven't said anything to us, how can we stay professional, but at the same time, let them know that like we're a resource and because of our training, we know where to direct them, but not, infringe on their personal space?
That is such a great question. And that's something I left out of my presentation. when I was thinking about this morning, that's one thing I meant to include. And so I'm so glad that you asked it. Thank you. The answer would be to reach out to them, to say, of course, in private, hey, are you okay? You didn't seem like yourself today, or you seemed upset today, or, it looks like you're struggling. You just tell them what you've observed. You're not making any value judgment on it, right? You're not saying, hey, you look like a loser, right? You're not doing anything like that. You're saying you look like you're struggling. You look like you're hurting. Do you want to talk to me about that? And then realizing that,
Okay, thank you so much.
yeah, your job is just to work them through that effective listening kind of, and then you decide how to ask, how to get them referred to counseling. Talk to them about what their options are. Valerie, you're next, but if your question is, what's a VCR? That's not funny.
I think I'm old enough to know what a VCR
Okay,
is.
good.
So my question was, especially around like midterms and finals when students start getting really stressed, besides referring to student counseling, what are some methods that you recommend or things you recommend us saying to them to kind of like bring those stress levels down?
Oh, that's another great question. Definitely. I've had this experience teaching, being a teaching assistant for a class in my grad school that was very stressful. And you're right, like there's a great opportunity to say, wow, you guys are really stressed out. Let's take a moment, right? Let's breathe. You guys can do this. It's going to be okay, right? Focus on, make sure you get enough sleep, make sure you're taking care of yourself, make sure you're studying hard. You can do this. If you're having problems, remember you can come talk to me, or you can talk to student counselor, but don't ignore this, right? And you can even have them do some breathing exercises, right? Do a nice circle breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. But the trick is the exhale's got to be longer and slower than the inhale. So a good circle breath looks like this. And you can see like a little bit, my shoulders drop. I'm relaxing, right? And you don't do that back to back. Just do it once every couple of minutes. All right, after the next session, we'll do another deep breath. What I tell them is like, whatever class it is, like if it's genetics, I usually have like a lot of students from genetics that are having meltdowns, right? I will tell them like, people pass genetics every year and you're a people, right? You can do this, right? I know it's not correct grammar, but you can do this. Like most people pass genetics, right? So that we're getting them looking at the goal rather than the fear of the catastrophe, right? And I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Carrie, you had a question.
Yes, sorry, my thing is on the wrong username. It's Madison Perry.
Hi.
But I was just saying I did dance and my teacher was like certified with forgot what it was, but she had this breathing technique that's similar to the circle, but it's a box. So you
Yep.
breathe in as you go and then breathe out and then breathe in and then breathe out. And that one really helped all of us whenever we were getting stressed out about competitions and having tests and everything. So I was just saying that's another resource you could use.
I did that
I
during
thought it
the
worked
wedding.
great.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's another thing called grounding in the moment, which I really like, which is easy to do. And basically you go through all your senses, and just tell your people like, find something yellow in this room. Okay, find 2 blue things. What do you hear? Well, I hear the clock ticking. I hear the sound of my voice. I hear the computer. I hear the air handler. Right. And you're going to do this a little slower and, with your calm psychologist voice. Right. And then you're going to talk about, do you have something to drink? What does it taste like? Right. Or if you have, like I have a reed diffuser in my office and I'll tell people that are upset, like, can you name the smell? Right. And we just go through all those senses For texture, I have a big fluffy pillow, right? Can you describe the texture of the pillow? And those type things. And you can do that with just regular objects in the classroom. And what it does is it brings people out of their head from the future and grounded into the present moment, right? So that's another great, like you can do that in a minute, you know, or 2 minutes rather. Like that's another, it doesn't take long, but that's another great thing to do. You can have people stand up and stretch, right? I forget, Madison was the dancer. I had one teacher that made us do the footloose dance. But that was a long time ago. All right. Other questions?
We have one question in the chat from Aaron. For context, Aaron is doing Psych 3070. So that's yeah, and we've got a lot of other psychology actually facilitators in different classes. Aaron says, how can we gently handle a situation where someone is oversharing about personal experiences, especially when we come to material talking about abnormal psychology?
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about oversharing in general, right? If they're telling you about what happened on their hot date last night, like you can tell them like, that's not what I'm here for, right? Just a gentle redirect. I'm here to help you with this, or we're here to focus on this. You know, there may be stuff going on in the world, you know, big news. It's like, yeah, I get it, but we're here to focus on this. Let's do our jobs and take care of this. Now, when it's a mental health issue, it's a little more sensitive, right? You don't want to stigmatize somebody or shut them down. But at the same time, sometimes their oversharing can hurt them and make other people uncomfortable. And you can say, like, thank you for sharing. I really want to focus on what we're doing today in this. And, you know, are you in therapy? Like, have you gone to student counseling? And encourage them to go and say, that's so great. And then kind of redirect back to what you're doing. Does that feel manageable? And, you know, and then if it's a big overshare that they keep doing, you can kind of pull them aside after class and say, like, you know, I get you're going through stuff. It's great that you're open about it, but I also know that there's some people that aren't safe to be open with, right? I only want to make sure that you should consider when you're sharing are people safe to hear this? Are you safe to say it in front of certain people? All right. And then just to finalize everything, I want to make sure you guys know about the Say Something report. We have what's called a BIT team, which is a behavioral intervention team, that if there is a problem student or staff member or faculty member on campus, you can make a report like, hey, I'm really worried about Dr. So-and-so. He doesn't look like he's doing well. He's forgetting things. Can you look into it? Or, you know, I'm a supplemental instructor and I have this person in my class that's oversharing, you know, their mental health issue. I've spoken to them about it, but they're continuing to do it. And it's starting to disrupt the class. And then what will happen is, remember I said, you guys can do some little interventions, but if those don't work, or if those feel too big for you, you can definitely pass it on up the chain. And by making that report, you're not getting people in trouble. You're getting this team of people who cares about our students to figure out how can we intervene in a way that is going to help this student and make sure that we're preserving this nice, calm educational environment where everyone can do well. Oh, great. Emily threw the link up there. Look, and I'm going to say this again, it looks like a police report. It is not. You're not getting people in trouble. You're saying this person's struggling and they could use some help, and I'm not the person to do that. Please help. All right. And you can do this for your roommate, like, hey, my roommate's drinking more. My roommate's dating this guy who, I find really scary. Any of those things you can put on there, and we'll do our best to intervene and help people. Okay. Emily, how was that? Was that a good brief synopsis of the Say Something report? Oh, and you know what? I also, anytime consultations are free. Like you can go, hey, Simon, I had this kid in my supplemental instruction class and they said this. What do you think? Like, give me a call. I'm always willing to help. All right, that's all I got, folks. Any more questions or anything else? Thank you so much for your time. And thanks for asking such great questions. They're really, you guys are on top of it.
Thank you so much for being with us today and providing all this really valuable information.
All right, good luck, you guys. Let me know how I can help, okay? Bye.
Bye. Awesome. Thanks everyone for asking great questions and engaging. Those are two essential offices for you to know of as a student yourself, but as certainly we're talking about SI as a leader as too. So we have a whole list of resources, which we may even talk about in our first biweekly briefly again. That's a huge part of, especially if you're new and you're not aware of all the resources at UNG, knowing those resources as a student and university employee is essential. So go study that, count that as part of your training hours, get paid to do it, but we do have that list of resources in your manual. Don't know what page, I'm sorry, I can't redirect right now, but yeah. Oscar, I think I'm going to turn it over to somebody for closing. And I don't know what returners need to do.
Real quick before the closing, I also just wanted to add, in the past like couple years, I feel like it's been a thing to like start joking about like different mental health things as well. And so I just want to say, like, if you see that in session, just go ahead and shut that down too. Like, hey, I noticed you joking about this. Like, that may be a joke you make with your friends, but like, I genuinely care about you. And so like, when you say things like that, like, I worry about you. And so just like letting them know, like, I care about you. So like, if you don't actually mean that, like, please don't say that around me. Otherwise, like, I'm going to be worried about you. I'm going to care about you. And like, you know, that maybe want me to like fill out that like bit form, that kind of thing. So if there's ever any joking, like definitely feel free to like shut that down, because that's not, it could be harmful to other people in session. It's really, joking about mental health isn't something we want to promote or do. So I just wanted to make sure I added that in there as well. Awesome. And so I am going to turn it over to Grace for our closing.
Hello everyone. I know it's been a very long day. So I'm gonna advise, or not advise, oh my goodness. I'm going to edit a little bit the closing activity that I had planned. So I'm going to pull up and share a quick little image file thing I made. So if you can't see this, just please let me know. On here, I wanted to have you guys, you can either annotate on here, or please, I encourage you to raise your hands and just kind of talk about some ways in which you would like to help with building relationships, be it with your professor, some ideas into how to do that. So pulling back from our activity before lunch, and also I have a couple different scenarios on here and just kind of thinking, how would I tackle this kind of scenario and try to build up a relationship, potentially to maybe even prevent some of these? Yes, Sandria.
I guess I'll just go over one of them. So I'll go over the top one. In that situation, personally, my first reaction would be to de-escalate the situation, depending on how passionate that student is being. And if I have the knowledge, right then, right there, maybe try to let them know why this professor is choosing that specific style or that preference of teaching. But if it's something that I, not secretly, but definitely won't voice it, kind of agree with or if I see or I overhear other students kind of saying something along those same lines, I might bring it up to the professor as far as in a really, I guess, gingerly way, not necessarily it being criticism, but making it kind of like is there a different route that we could go, or is there a different route that I personally can take during my sessions to kind of complement how you do this to help these students farther along in their learning. But definitely not join in on the complaints for sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Trying to de-escalate the situation is one of the best steps to take. All right. I see William's hand. You can go ahead, William.
Yeah, so just going off what Zan said, I think that first one, I think the best thing to do in that situation is just kind of like change the discussion basically, but not too much. Someone's complaining to me about that. I'm like, okay, my reaction would be, so where do we go? Like, how can I help you like improve on these things, or how can I help you like from here on? You know what I mean? I think, and also then bringing up to the professor, like, I've heard this is a problem some people are facing. Is that something you commonly see? Things like that.
All right. Go ahead, Sydney.
So for the second one, I would tell them that I could maybe give them, like email them some of the materials that I've used for past sessions and that what I would be covering in future sessions. And then I would direct them to the tutoring service since we aren't one. And if they don't know where it is, I would take them to show them where it is and try and help them find someone who can help them in the topic that they need help with.
Yeah, a lot of redirection will come into play with a lot of these. So kind of what you had mentioned, William, and also Sydney with redirecting to tutoring. All right, and go ahead, McKenna.
Essentially say what Abulu had put in, like pretty much like send them some of the stuff that I had used in the previous sessions and inform them about like when the next sessions are going to be, and if like they still want some like one-on-one type stuff, I'd be like offer them like bonus hours are at this time on this day. If you still have questions, you can come to me there and then we can discuss it in more detail. Or if you just work better in one-on-one situations, then by all means go to like the tutoring service. They will absolutely have somebody there that you can do like a review thing with.
All right, and I see next we have Brett. You can go ahead.
So I'm gonna answer the third one. We're not supposed to help the professor in any way with grading, so I'd have to tell him that we aren't allowed to because that violates confidentiality rules. And then after that, I'd also email either Emily or Sarah to tell them about that because that's not right. We're not supposed to be involved in that in any way.
Yeah, and as always, if you're ever unsure, you can always email Emily, Sarah, or even your mentors for some of these situations. All right, and I think I saw Jenny, you had your hand up for a second there. Did you have something you wanted to say?
You already answered the question.
All right, and I know we're a little tight for time here. We have about a minute left, but does anybody in general have something like maybe with the students that if you're a returning facilitator, how is one way that you started off the semester building up a relationship with your students in session? Yeah, go ahead, Erica.
So I obviously didn't have like in-person sessions a lot. And so I would still ask them like what their major is, try to get to know them and try to remember that about them. Like just like surface level stuff like that, like what their major is. So that way, like I'm showing them that I am taking time to like get to know them and that I'm, you know, not just like I'm a resource as well. Like, you know, if they need directing to like student counseling, anything like that, I'm a peer as well. So that's something that I would do.
Well, thank you with everyone who shared, and that is it what I had for this activity now that we're at 12:30 or not 12, 2:30. So I'll go ahead and hand it back to Oscar, Sarah, Emily.
Oh, I wanted to say really quick too, in case you don't know, and if you're like a freshman or something like that, for Dahlonega campus, student counseling and accessibility services are both in Stewart on that ground floor. And then if you're on Gainesville, student counseling is in the student center, and student accessibility, I think, is in Dunlap unless they moved. I'm pretty sure I checked like a year or two ago, so that might have moved, but I'm pretty sure they're there. And if you have any questions, you can always, I'm pretty sure it's like on the website or something.
Sweet. Thank you, Valerie. And thank you all for attending day 2 of training and being attentive, everything like that, participating, staying present, loving that. We are excited to see you all in person tomorrow on the Gainesville campus. So just remember our dress code, and I'm going to be sending out another email reminder. New facilitators and returners, in that email, I'm also going to include a video about Zoom, setting up Zoom in the room. So new facilitators, be sure to watch that so we'll be ready to go. Returners, if you need a refresher, a great resource. And then also new facilitators, don't forget, if you have not already sent me your Strengths Quest assessment results, please send those to me no later than 6 o'clock tonight. And that is all I have. Emily and Sarah, do y'all have anything?
I don't think so. Not from me.
Awesome. Well, thank you all again. Day 2 was great, and we are so excited to see you tomorrow in person.
There's a question about homework.
Yeah, so the homework is essentially watching that video and the strengths assessment.
So that's for new people only.
Yes.
Yeah. Feel free to stay back. Yeah, if anybody has any extra questions.
I actually have a question. It's about my placement. I still haven't gotten a confirmation about that. I don't know if I should keep waiting or.
Jennifer, Sarah's here. I can't see Sarah. Did you? I can't hear Sarah. Can
no.
Okay, and we need to stop the recording too.